All right, welcome back to another little visual walkthrough. We're going to talk through the visual for sprint planning and the example agenda I've created a visual for to explain it a little bit more. How do you find it? Well, as you might have guessed, pragmaticshift.com. You go to the blog post up in the top right. Then you click the Scrum Event Agenda Sprint Planning blog post. And as it mentions, this is not the best way, the right way, or the only way to do it. It is a way to do sprint planning. It's in case you're feeling stuck, you're not sure if you're doing it right. It's a good way to check in, just to get some inspiration perhaps. Feel free to use it as is, share it, change it, ignore it, entirely up to you. What you want to do next is click this download button, Scrum Event Agendas. You can see downloads, bam, all done, no signups needed or anything. I like to keep it simple. And then you get this visual right here. Sprint planning, very exciting times. Everyone's favorite event, of course, if done well. How does it go? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You got some inputs, you got some stuff you want to do in terms of agenda, and then of course you have some outputs as well. So what are the inputs? Well, we want the product backlog, of course, as well as the product goal, which sits within the product backlog. We want the Scrum team, very important. Your availability and flow metrics, should you have them. If not, at the very least availability, if you're just getting started. Your definition of done should already be in place, even if you've just gotten started. And any increment, if you've already built any, that is to say, any existing product that you've put together, and any retrospective improvements that you may have identified before. Once all is said and done, the outputs should be the sprint backlog, which consists of the sprint goal, which qualifies the why we're doing this sprint. It's kind of the value case for the sprint. The product backlog items we believe is going to help us achieve that, and the plan to achieve the sprint goal. So how do we do it? Well, I like to go this route. I like to suggest the product owner starts by presenting their value case for the sprint and how they believe it would enable us to achieve or get closer to the product goal. I like to ask the product owner to try and think 1, 2, or ideally even 3 sprints ahead in terms of potential goals that they could bring in and kind of pitch to the Scrum team as, hey, I think this would be the next best thing, because that will help them with refinement as well. And it'll help the team to have an idea of where are we going after this. However, we only have one sprint goal at a time. So until it is a committed to sprint goal by the Scrum team, it's just a product owner goal, I call it, or it's a aspirational goal until then, just to help us think ahead. The Scrum team then review and discuss that along with the inputs, right? These ones right here, and create the sprint goal. The developers pull in the product backlog items they believe are necessary into the sprint backlog and create a plan for how to achieve the sprint goal. Very important, the developers pull in the items, right? So the developers are the ones who are accountable for the sprint backlog. So they pull in the items they think are needed. However, that does not mean the product owner or the Scrum Master can't poke and prod. You can always ask questions. You can always discuss and converse and question. However, each accountability does have final say on the things that they are accountable for. Once that is sorted, the sprint goal is then committed to, and the fun work towards the next increment being delivered begins. The arrows back and forth then, what do they mean? Well, they mean quite simply that it's not always linear. Sometimes we're very lucky and everything just clicks and we can get in and out in maybe 15 minutes. Great. Sometimes as the developers start breaking down the work and start thinking through how to deliver it and they create that plan, they might realize that it's either too much or not enough. And what we want to do then is we want to go back and maybe tweak the sprint goal a little bit until it feels more right, more achievable, more appropriate for what it is we're trying to achieve and commit to for that sprint. During sprint planning is the only time the sprint goal changes. Once sprint planning is finished, it's committed to. We don't change it for the duration of the sprint. The rest of the sprint backlog might change as we learn more, but the sprint goal itself only changes during sprint planning. Once all that is said and done, we're good to go. Nice and simple. Now, this little comic is just a silly way of visualizing how we might interact and what it might look like. And you've got the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers. And as you can see from the agenda, product owners start by pitching their idea. I think this is the next best thing to do. Why don't we go for that? In this instance, developers agree. They say, yeah, you know what, seems good. Let's just do a sanity check for our metrics, etc., to see if that's sounding about right. And they're double checking. They're finding, yep, town hall, all is good. We can take that into account. oh, actually, we need Steve's expertise for part of this. Is Steve going to be available when we're getting to that stuff, or do we need to reconsider that? And then they go back to the product owner, they have the conversation, and they maybe suggest some tweaks about what it's going to look like, or scope of it, or overall direction. And the product owner in this instance agrees and say, yep, you know what, that's a good idea. Considering what's in front of us, let's take that in mind and do it that way. Then the developers continue. They start pulling in the work, they start creating that plan and idea for, cool, how are we going to achieve this goal, right? And very importantly, you can include stuff that's not directly contributing towards the sprint goal. Doing maintenance, looking after the product and existing increments as well, is part of the work the Scrum team should be doing. And then they go back and they start breaking down into a more detailed plan. Now we're maybe looking at, when are certain dependencies? Are some of them time sensitive perhaps? Do we need to rethink certain things? And again, they just check in with the product owner. If they're not sure or they want to just double check, always a conversation, right? That collaborative conversation. That is why the entire Scrum team is there for sprint planning, so that we can do this together. And then, right at the end, everything seems good and they're ready to go after that value. And that's it. Nothing too bad, nothing too nefarious. Sprint planning done well, if we've done the refinement needed to make sure we can actually talk about why we're doing this and where we're going to go next, can be very exciting, can be very enjoyable. If done badly, very painful, probably the most painful event in Scrum if done badly. So, use this, ignore it, learn from it, but I hope you have some good sprint planning to go forward. And with that, best of luck, Scrum on, you take care of yourself.